We now have a computer made from real human cells. Not inspired by the brain, not trained to imitate the brain. Human cells, living neurons connected directly to a tiny computer chip. And here's the part that still sounds like science fiction. You don't type instruction into it. You don't even have to tell it what to do. The neurons receive electrical informations, and then they respond. The activities get translated back into the computer. In other words, we've built a machine that uses part of a living nervous system as its hardware. And we already taught one to play Pong. But Pong isn't the part that bothers me, because Pong was just the beginning. Those same researchers have kept pushing this further. More complicated signals, more complicated tasks, more learning. So what exactly did we build? A tiny piece of a brain being used as a machine?
What's in my hands right now are tiny, lab-grown brains. The scientists who make them say they're alive. What's in there will be guided in this lab to become what's in here, to try to make a living computer. It's giving me goosebumps.
Or something alive sitting behind the screen doing work for us? The problem with that last question, we don't actually know if there's anyone there. And that's where this really gets strange. Because even if there's nobody thinking, nobody watching, nobody feeling, the cells can still learn. They can still change their behavior. They can still figure out which signal lead to the outcome they need. They can do something that looks remarkably familiar. Because Pong was never the scary part. The scary part is what happens when we get good at this. Let's slow down for a second, because the next question is the one everyone actually wants answered. Is this a human brain? No. What we are talking about is a small handful of brain cells, sometimes just like a flat layer of them. We're not talking about a miniature human brain sitting inside a computer. We're talking about something much smaller. Sometimes it's a tiny layer of living neurons spread across a chip. Sometimes it's a tiny cluster of cells smaller than a grain of rice. It has nowhere a size, structure, or complexity of an actual human brain, but it's still alive and somehow it can learn. But this was the part that felt strange to me. Those cells are really human, and here's exactly how you get them. You start with something as ordinary as a piece of someone's skin. Every cell in your human body already has the full instruction to become any other kind of cell. A skin cell, a heart cell, or a brain cell. You just get locked into being one specific thing early on, and normally it stays that way for life. But in 2006, a scientist figured out how to unlock it again. A specific set of signals that reset an adult cell back to a blank slate. The same kind of blank flexible cell you would find in an embryo, capable of becoming anything. That won him the Nobel Prize. From there, scientists guide that blank cell into becoming a neural, a brain cell on purpose. Grow enough of them together, and they start doing what neurons do naturally. They connect to each other. They start firing signals back and forth. That's the same basic idea that led scientists connect real rat neurons to a small robot back in 2008. The cells receive signals from the robot sensors. Their activities steered it. Through nothing but trial and error, that robot learned to avoid walls on its own, controlled entirely by a dish of living brain cells sitting in a lab, nowhere near the machine's body. So the question that kept coming to my mind was, why would anyone want to build a computer made from living cells? Why not just keep making normal computers faster and more powerful? The answer I got was, normal computers are starting to run into problems that aren't so easy to engineer around. The first is the size. For decades, engineers made chips faster by making their tiny switches smaller and smaller, but you can only shrink something so far. Eventually, you start getting so close to the smallest scale that the laws of physics themselves becomes part of the problem. But there's another problem.
The objective of the evolution was to optimize its energy consumption. As a result, a living neuron is 1 million times more efficient as the artificial neuron which are used in ChatGPT, for instance. We expect to have biocomputers consume hundreds times less energy. Actually, not to be a problem anymore.
A computer doesn't just spend energy thinking. It spends a huge amount of energy moving information around. One part stores the information, another part processes it. So when the computer needs something, it has to move the information from one place to another, again and again and again, millions of times. But your brain doesn't separate those jobs in the same way. The same network of connections helps stores information and process it. The information doesn't have to keep traveling back and forth between completely separate places. And that's one reason biology can do something our computers struggle with. It can process enormous amount of information without constantly moving that information around. So scientists aren't looking at biology because silicon stopped working. They started looking at it because biology already solved the problem we are spending billions trying to solve with machines. Now here's the part most videos I've watched don't talk about. This thing is actually alive.
Here we have the organoids that I started 3 weeks ago. And here you can already see by eye.
Yes, you can. So these have sort of clumped together into groups, haven't they?
Yes.
Flora waits about 4 months for the organoid to grow into something that looks like this before adopting a microscopic analysis technique called immunofluorescence, which lets her get a better look at what's happening inside the clusters.
Not alive as a metaphor, alive the way anything living is alive. It has to be kept at an exact consistent temperature. It needs a steady flow of special nutrient liquid, pumped in automatically, timed down to the hour, feeding the cells the way blood feeds the rest of your body. And if that system fails, the temperature, the liquid, the timing, any of it, the computer doesn't freeze up, it doesn't need a restart. It dies. The same field has since pushed this system further, from simple game environments to pattern recognition and other forms of learning, and now researchers are pushing towards something far more complicated: Doom. A game that requires an entirely different level of interaction with a digital world. From a rat steering a robot, to a human neuron learning Pong, to a living neural network being pushed towards increasingly complex tasks. That progression should make you uncomfortable for a simple reason. We don't know if there's anyone in there. Here's why that won't stay simple. The cells are connected to electrodes that can both read their activities and send signals back to them.
They hate chaos. If you give them a signal they can't predict, it stresses them out. So the setup was simple and kind of mean. When they missed the ball, they got hit with scrambled, random noise. When they hit it back, the signal went calm and steady. The neurons have no idea what Pong is. They're not playing to win. They're just trying to make the chaos stop.
The system doesn't have to understand the game. It doesn't have to know what Pong is or Doom is. It doesn't even have to know it's playing a game. It just learns one thing. Some patterns lead to a better outcome, and others lead to a worse one. And eventually, you start choosing the pattern that works. Surprisingly, that's actually how we learn too. Touch something hot, you pull your hands away. Do something that hurts you, you learn not to repeat it. Do something that feels good, you move towards it again. We spend most of our life doing one very simple thing: move away from discomfort towards reward. We call it learning. And somehow, we build something that doesn't need to understand a word we say, doesn't need to know what the game is, and maybe not feel anything at all, but can still learn which way to move. If there's nobody inside that dish capable of feeling pain, then why do the system keep moving away from the signal we could call painful? What exactly is learning? The cell, the network, or something in between that we haven't learned how to recognize yet? Here's how far this has already gone. One company in Switzerland lets you log in from anywhere and run experiments on real human brain tissues. They grow it, they keep it alive, and you control the experiment from your laptop. It's no longer a laboratory experiment anymore. It's something you can rent. And none of this is even the first time we've done this to something smaller than us. Bees have been trained for decades to detect explosive, restrained so their movement can be tracked, conditioned over and over. Sugar and water paired with a scent until they respond automatically, every time. Nobody knows for certain what that feels like from inside the bee. We simply decided it doesn't matter enough to stop. Around 5,000 dogs served in Vietnam. Most of them didn't come back home because the government classified them as equipment. Surplus. At least 2,000 were euthanized. The rest were left behind or abandoned. The men who fought beside them begged for years to bring them home, but the answer was no. It took nearly 3 decades before the law finally changed.
I would say that Shep was probably, and the other 2 dogs that I handled were probably the best partners that I could have to go to work with.
I was happy to leave, but I had no idea what was going to happen to Vogie or any of the dogs, really. I just assumed that at some point they would be sent back home.
So I discovered the same pattern every time. Find intelligence smaller than ours, decide what it's for, then use it for as long as it's useful.
Many are familiar with the anti-tank dogs that the Soviets trained in the 1940s to deliver bombs to German tanks during World War II. But have you heard of the pigeon-guided bombs? Just like dogs and bees, pigeons can be conditioned to respond to a particular stimulus. Say, scoring in ping pong means the little feeder opens up so the pigeon can eat. But how do you take a pigeon from playing ping pong to guiding a bomb? Turns out, in 3 easy steps.
Now go back to the dish. Alive, grown from someone's own skin, taught the same way we've taught everything smaller than us, through a loop of signals it never asked to be part of. Then ask yourself this question: every single time, we were the one deciding. Now imagine that changes. Imagine something is eventually built that is smarter than us, the same way we are smarter than bees. And imagine it needs power to keep running, more computing, more biological intelligence to build itself on, and if that intelligence becomes smarter than us, it won't have to invent the idea of using something smaller than itself, because we already taught it how. Nobody knows if this will actually happen. We use bees because they can smell what we can't. We use dogs because they can sense what we can't. We're learning to use living brain cells because they can compute in a way machines struggle to. So if something out there ever becomes smarter than us, and one day it needs a living brain to keep its system running, whose do you think it reaches for first?